Hello and welcome to your weekly astrology forecast. This is for the week of September 15th through the 22nd. And this is the week before the next eclipse, which is a new moon eclipse. But before we get into that, thank you so much to the Patreon members for supporting my work. I have two tiers. The first tier is to support this weekly astrology forecast. And then the second tier, you receive a monthly horoscope for your rising sign. And I think in October, once I get back from my trip and I have more brain space and I have more capacity, I'm going to do more with y'all. Maybe I'll do um, yeah, maybe how to read your natal chart, just like a 1 hour webinar or yeah, I'll get creative, but I really appreciate all of you supporting me. And lastly, if you want to learn how to read your natal chart so that these transits make more sense to you personally, I am teaching a 12-week class on how to read your natal chart. We start October 6th. We meet once a week on Monday for 2 hours. And if you can't make that time, then they are recorded for you. I offer different payment options so that it's the most accessible that it can be. And this is just to read your natal chart. We're going to learn how to read your natal chart with transits starting in 2026. So look out for that. But again, thank you all so much for being here. I appeared on Amanda Seales' show earlier this week. And so I know we have a lot of new people on this channel. So welcome, everybody. Oi, so last week was a lot. And I mentioned in my weekly astrology forecasts, the monthly astrology forecast I do with Stephanie Campos, and the monthly astrology horoscopes I do for each rising sign, that September was going to be a very chaotic month of fated endings and beginnings because 5 planets were changing signs. And also, we have these eclipses. And Virgo and Pisces is the axis about spirituality and our body and divinity and integrating both. So, I mean, we're in the middle of it. We had our first lunation, our first lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces on September 7th. And like I mentioned, we're going to have our second eclipse in the sign of Virgo. It's a solar eclipse, it's a new moon on September 22nd. So, this horoscope, this forecast will only be from Monday to Sunday. So, it's not going to cover the eclipse. I'm going to do that next week. So, the energies of eclipse season are always chaotic. Okay. In my culture, in Korea, in the indigenous spiritual practices of shamanism in Korea, eclipses are a time when you have to do a lot of protection, energetic protection, move slowly, intentionally, pray. This is a time to give reverence to your ancestors, pray to your ancestors, create an altar, and just do the best you can to surrender to this moment. And whatever indigenous spiritual practices your lineage is from, like every culture has a practice during eclipse season. This is a time when the veil is very thin and darkness and yes, evil forces come out. And this is when shamans used to bang drums and they ward off evil spirits because this is when, if you've watched K-pop Demon Hunters, Hanmoon means the gate, the spiritual gate. And so that's when it becomes very thin during eclipse season. So my advice for you and the best thing to do at this time is to do spiritual cleansing and protection. This is a great time to do spiritual baths and go see a healer, a Reiki healer, do some protection spells because there's a lot going on all at once. And also, I know this is challenging for some people, especially if your businesses are reliant on social media, but try to have like a break, like a 1 hour time limit for social media because our bodies can't digest everything that is going on all at once. So on September 8th, Nepal's Gen Z led protests against a corrupt government and forced the prime minister to resign. And so essentially Gen Z, um, it was their version of storm the Bastille a la the French Revolution. And um, unfortunately, 20 young, it might be more at this point, but 20 young people were murdered who were peacefully protesting. And that happened starting on September 8th, which was the day after the lunar eclipse in Pisces. And that lunar eclipse, which was a full moon, was an ending. So this was an ending of a regime. And since then, I'm recording this on September 14th, they have essentially Gen Z nominated and voted for their first woman prime minister via Discord. So I think this is like reflecting all of the different astrological transits happening at this moment, right? Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries, these moments of revolution, these historical cycles that don't repeat, but they rhyme. And also it being led by Gen Z, which Neptune in Aries is a very young sign. So my heart and my thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Nepal because unfortunately, when revolutions happen, a lot of innocent people are murdered as well. And on September 10th, I mean, I'm only giving you the highlights. There's so many different things that went on, like Israel bombing Qatar, and Qatar is the they are negotiating with the United States for a ceasefire in Gaza. So Israel bombing Qatar is essentially like, we're not in negotiation for a ceasefire anytime soon. That happened, and like a bunch of laws were just passed this past weekend of how they're continuing to crack down if you speak out. And it just goes to show you that so many of us are awakening and we're aware now, and they're just like grasping at the straws, right? This is like empire's death rattle at its death rattle at its death, you know? So um I would recommend watching my hour-long conversation with Amanda on her show on Amanda Land TV, where I talk about the, outer planets going retrograde, and this is a time of review and recalibration. And I mean, I talk about it on here too. So, September 10th, Charlie Kirk, who was a right-wing influencer, was murdered in Utah. He was 31 years old. And what I found so interesting about this is that he's 31. So he's in an eighth house perfection year. And somebody else who's in an eighth house perfection year is me, yours truly, and also Donald Trump. And the eighth house means a lot of things, right? It's about um death. It could be metaphorical, but sometimes it could be literal. The eighth house is a place of a setting right before the sun sets. So being in eighth house year at 31, I mean, if you're in an eighth house year now, don't worry, don't like crash out. It doesn't mean literal death, but sometimes it does. And then I noticed that Mars in Libra was conjunct his sun. He is a Libra sun. So Mars being the god of war, right? And about guns and violence on his sun, which is his life force energy. There were other transits that happened that day that were just so like on brand. Uranus and Gemini on his south node, which gave this like shock factor. I did a breakdown of his astrology on my TikTok if anyone is interested. I don't know if I'm going to put it up on here because of like, I don't know. But anyway, it was just also like, I don't know the right words, shocking or just karma. I don't know that he said, because he was very pro gun. These are his words. He said, quote, gun deaths, unfortunately, are worth it if it means it will keep the Second Amendment. This was also the day on September 10th when the sun conjunct the south node at 18 degrees. And then the moon entered Taurus, and he was shot in the neck. And in medical astrology, Taurus rules the neck. And the moon was applying to a square to Pluto, the god of death, Hades, the god of the underworld. I listened back to last week's astrology forecast when I talked about the sun conjunct the south node. And I was like, ooh, this is a very dicey transit. Physically, you might have felt tired, but also the sun conjunct the south node, it's just not it could also be a fall of, now that I look back, I'm like, oh, that could have been because the sun is also royalty, a leader. It could have definitely been the fall of a leader. But I don't know if I mentioned it in last week's astrology forecast, but in the Palestine liberation chart, Palestine is a Virgo rising. And so the South Node is going through Palestine's chart, first house. And so the sun going through that South Node, I was like, ooh, this could be that they're not going to get the aid. They're not going to get something to help them. But what it ended up happening was Israel was sending notifications to the north of Gaza, the Gaza city, to evacuate. And so then now they're starting to bomb Gaza city, like terrible hellfire bombs. And so what it looks like they're doing is they're probably going to annex the north of Gaza as well as the West Bank. So yeah, I mean, since since that Palestine independence chart has Palestine with a Virgo rising and the seventh house cusp is Pisces, these eclipses are happening in Palestine's first and seventh houses. The seventh house, open enemies, right? The other, and also Israel has a Libra rising, so it was having Mars going through its first house. So the aggression, just the bombardment on Palestine was just more multiplied in the last couple of weeks. So none of this is easy, like we're literally living in a very violent system, and violence has become so normalized that we're all like desensitized now. When I watched that video of Charlie Kirk being murdered, I was not fazed. And I hate that I have to say that because we watched George Floyd be murdered, right? With the Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. I've watched babies being blown up for the last 2 years, and people being murdered, like, and I hate that I hate that it's desensitized me to some degree, that seeing him being shot was not it. I was just like, oh, it wasn't shocking to me. We live in a very violent system, country, culture, and I don't like that it's come to this point. I still have empathy. I still have compassion for death and the ways in which all of us are suffering under this violent system. But at the same time, um, we can't get distracted by these things and that are trying to divide us even further, because again, we're waking up, we're coming online, and so they want to double down on dividing us and making us feel a sense of despair. And Mariam Kaba's book, Let This Radicalize You, there's this line in the introduction: don't fall into despair, let this radicalize you. So for the astrology of this week, I'm not going to say that it's going to be easy because now we have a waning moon and we're going into a solar eclipse, which is a little gnarly. I'm not going to lie. Out of the both of the eclipses, the lunar eclipse in Pisces was the more, I can't even believe that, like, that was the easier one, right? And I hope that reiterated this enough that I think collectively and like world astrology wise, there's like world astrology where the lunar eclipse in Pisces was something that turned out to be very violent. But in your own personal life, that lunar eclipse in Pisces, I think for some was a shocking end to something, a shocking end to a moment in your life where you might not have anticipated that you had to let go of so quickly. And so how can we now root into our bodies, because that's what Virgo wants us to do, so that we can surrender to what is happening in this moment, because none of us can control what is happening at the global level, at the earth level. We can only do our part. So on September 15th, Venus in Leo was sextile Mars in Libra at 25 degrees. And this is really lovely. Venus is the planet of relationships, bonds, value, worth, and it's going to be in a harmonious relationship to Mars and Libra. So at the highest conscious form, this is making bonds with people, um, activating each other, going to some kind of protest or doing something where you're connecting with people who have similar values to you and making something happen. This is just really lovely. Like, I like sextiles because they're really sweet. Um, and I think that because Venus and Mars are both relational planets, they're personal planets, this is just a great day to connect with people, reach out to people, and try to, again, like build community. On September 17th, Mercury in Virgo will oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 28 degrees. So when Saturn re-entered Pisces, it was kind of hanging out at the 29th degree, the anaretic degree. Things were feeling really heavy, right? And so when Mercury is opposite Saturn, conversations can get real and serious and sobering. This is a great day to form boundaries and express your boundaries if you have them, if you have not expressed them before. And yeah, this is just like maybe also not seeing eye to eye with somebody. And sometimes like you have to discern. Discern is a good word for Saturn. You have to discern when is a time to engage and when is a good time to walk away. But yeah, this is a day that you might get into an argument with somebody, or you might not see eye to eye with somebody, or you take the power back and say, I had enough. Enough is enough. I'm forming my boundary. And this is where Saturn comes in. September 18th, Mercury will ingress into Libra. The same day, it will oppose Neptune retrograde in Aries at 0 degrees. And so this is a day to be careful, I would say, because Mercury is the planet of communication, messages. If you are trying to say something or speak something or express something, and opposite Neptune, this could have some kind of foggy, confused nature. Like you don't know what the truth is, or somebody could be trying to manipulate you or trying to get you to do something. And you're like, I don't know if they're telling the truth or not. Just listen to your gut. Neptune in Aries, I was saying this on Amanda's show. This is having these false leaders, these false prophets, right? And I think a lot of us fall into this trap of wanting to be saved. And we live in a culture that's obsessed with celebrity and influencers. And a lot of us don't believe we have the worth within us. So then we look to somebody else. And I would say, I would caution you of this because um, this is where you can't pedestal an influencer or celebrity or somebody that you think is like knows better than you or that you think is going to save you. Just be careful on this day of false information, and you might feel like you don't know who to trust. So listen to your intuition. These are cardinal signs at 0 degrees at the world point. So we can expect to hear some news on this day. And I don't know. I'm afraid that this is the day that they're going to be like, this is where we're going to invade, because the US right now is trying to create these other proxy wars in like, you know, um, the US is a death machine. So what I find to be really comforting though is people are recognizing the patterns. They're recognizing and doing their own like investigative work to see, oh, should we trust this person? Maybe we should do our own digging. I'm somebody who used to watch Scandal. I'm rewatching it on Netflix right now. And all I have to say to you is B613. If you know, you know. On September 19th, the moon officially enters Virgo. And so now we're really feeling this eclipse energy. On the same day, Venus will ingress into Virgo, where Venus is in its fall. Mercury and Libra will trine Uranus retrograde in Gemini at 1 degree. And then it will trine Pluto retrograde in Aquarius at 1 degree. Okay, watch out for what happens in the next 3 days, starting on September 19th. I mean, this whole week, right? This is like the week before the eclipse. I feel like something's going down. Okay. Like, first at the world level, like world astrology, some energy is because things happen when there's a trine. So you have to get out of this binary thinking of good or bad because Mercury in Libra is in a trine, which is a 120-degree angle. It's a harmonious angle to Uranus and Gemini. Okay, this is like unexpected news, unexpected, shocking revelations, perhaps. Mercury in Libra, again, is going to trine to Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto and Aquarius is about revolution. Now, for us, we the people, we can use this energy, this grand air trine to our benefit, disseminate information, educate people, get people to organize locally and start, sharing with people what are your rights? What are your rights here? And get people to organize together. This is such great energy for that. However, I do see that the powers that be, the politicians who are corrupt, could use this energy to enforce, again, they could pass some bill because Mercury, again, is like contracts and news, something nefarious that, again, like doubles down on censorship or, trying to oppress us even more. So when these things happen, it's so important for us as a collective to organize locally, to know our rights, educate ourselves, to form communities, and this is how we can combat and use the energies for our revolution. Venus in Virgo is okay. So Venus is in its fall in the sign of Virgo. This is a very independent, self-made Venus. Venus rules two signs, Libra and Taurus, and it's exalted in Pisces. So when it's in the opposite of its exaltation, it's in its fall. Now, I always say like planets that are in their fall or detriment, they're like immigrants. They don't necessarily understand the language. It's not like their first language. They don't know the customs, but they operate and they express themselves in that planet in that sign. I'm sorry, the planet expresses itself in the sign in a different way. And Virgo is a mercurial sign. It pays attention to the detail. It's very analytical, whereas Venus in its natural form wants to love and form bonds, you know? But when it's in the sign of Virgo, it's very analytical, very judgmental, very critical. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's learning the language of love in a different way. So we can use this energy for paying attention to the detail. You can get a haircut during this time. A lot of estheticians have Venus in Virgo because they have to pay attention, you know, to the detail. A lot of people in fashion have Venus in Virgo because you have to be meticulous. So Venus usually spends about like a month or a month in a sign, I think. Let's see. I think it's going to change to the sign of Libra in October 13th. So it's about a month that it'll be there. Okay, September 20th, Venus in Virgo will square Uranus in Gemini at 1 degree. Now, Venus, again, everything I said about bonds, relationships, value is squaring a disruptor. It's squaring Uranus, which is wanting change and rebellion and revolution. So, September 20th, we can hear some news around maybe the financial markets of how we're actually in a recession. Something of value might be devaluing. This is what I think of when I see Venus squaring Uranus. But this could also just mean some surprising news. So you want to look at your Virgo and your Gemini house and see where Venus is traveling through your Venus and Virgo house, and your Uranus is transiting through your Gemini house. And those two things are coming into a conflict. So, yeah, you want to pay attention to that. We had these last month when Mercury was square Uranus. Okay, was it last month or was it just like a week ago? Let's see. Sorry, I should have written that down. Oh, yes, it was September 3rd. Mercury in Virgo was square Uranus in Gemini at 1 degree. So, yeah, in the beginning of the month of September, the same thing was happening to Mercury. On September 21st, the sun in Virgo will oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 28 degrees. And this is the day of the partial solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo at 3:54 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so September 21st, this eclipse is a little bit more of a serious tone, okay? This is a new moon eclipse. So something is beginning, something is being seeded. However, it is a south node eclipse. So something is being purged and cleansed and released. And so you want to think back to 2006 to 2007. We had eclipses in these exact nodes. So the north node was in Pisces and the south node was in Virgo. Now, when the sun is opposite Saturn, again, this has a very serious tone. Saturn is the god of the earth, of agriculture. And if you look at the glyph of Saturn, it's the scythe. So the scythe is something that cuts the wheat, okay? And in a lot of cultures, that scythe is also the symbol of the Grim Reaper. And yes, Saturn also, some significations is death and also, what is it? Significations of death and also wealth, because back then, wealth was from the land. Also, Saturn And the glyph of Saturn, the scythe, is what's on the communist flag. So the wealth, so that's what communism is, right? Like the wealth is in the people's hands. This is all to say that Saturn definitely has this nobody likes Saturn. Because everybody looks at Saturn and is like, oh, you're cramping my style, you're making me work hard. But Saturn ultimately wants three things. It wants discipline, it wants a plan and structure. And so when the sun is opposite Saturn, it's kind of like this reality check, this sobering moment of like, man, I'm not as far along as I thought I was. Maybe I do need to have more structure. Maybe, this is going to take more work than I realized. This is like this very sobering moment, this reality check moment. Okay. And the ruler of this new moon is Mercury in Libra. So there is some kind of justice being served. Okay. I don't know. There's a very serious tone to this solar eclipse also because it's at 29 degrees. This is the anaretic degree. Remember when we had a new moon back in August that was at 0 degrees? I spoke a lot about that last month. And now we're finishing up the Virgo season with this eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo. This is the anaretic degree. I call this the crashing out degree. Something is trying to, it's like the death rattle. Something is trying to finish up its story. So you want to look again in your Virgo house, and you just spent the whole entire season since August of Virgo. You had the sun transiting through Virgo, you had Mercury transiting through Virgo, and now you're going to have Venus transiting through there and the South Node. So it's a lot of Virgo. And Virgo, again, is a mutable earth sign ruled by Mercury. And Virgo is about rooting into the intelligence and wisdom of your body, rooting in. If you think about this time of year, now we're heading into the fall in the Northern Hemisphere. This is the time of year where there's a harvest and you pick all of the fruits off the trees and you kind of sort out what is rotten and what is good to eat or preserve. So that's also why Virgos are about editing and sorting and parsing. And also, it's about getting ready for the winter months of when nothing is necessarily growing, but everything in nature is resting. So, I know that a lot of the astrology is portending to all of this change. I mean, you could feel it if you are at all paying attention to what's going on. But I would say try to focus on what you can control because the shadow aspect of Virgo is anxiety and being all up in the head and like, over analyzing things and crashing out. And Virgos need to work with their hands and they need to be grounded into the earth. And so do the best you can during this time. Try to find an activity or something that will help you move through these energies and transmute and get your hands dirty. I don't know, I'm not necessarily a gardener, so I don't know if this is a planting season or if you can plant something, but I've just been really enjoying junk journaling, which I learned from my friend Kim Saida. I just went to a kanefe making class today. Surrounding yourself with people and dancing and music and singing, all of these things are helpful things at this moment to move through these times. Because again, it's not about burying your head in the sand, it's not about disassociating, but how can I be rooted into all these changes and also help and sit with these emotions and help myself move these emotions and move through these energies. And at the end of the day, Virgo is about being humble and being of service to the greater collective. A lot of Virgos are healers and nurses and doctors. So, how can you also channel your skill sets and your talents to help the greater collective? So, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support, and I will see you next week.